Have you ever had this moment? Lights off, your phone screen glowing right in front of your face, and you open your banking app, not exactly because you need to transfer money, but because you want to check whether you're okay or falling behind. The number appears. You let out a breath, light or heavy, depending, and then, with a very human reflex, you wonder, people my age, do they have more than me? And right after that, as if the universe has a habit of messing with you scroll social media. Someone posts a photo at the airport captioned, "Quick getaway." Someone else shows off a new car. The showroom lights glossy, like their life has never once had a surprise bill. You're not jealous in some TV drama way. You're just curious. The kind of curiosity that makes your stomach sink a little. Where did they get that money? Or am I the only one who's worried? Let me be honest. Most of us are comparing in silence. No one says it out loud. So you start to think you're weird for constantly thinking about money. But money is very good at keeping you awake because it isn't just a number. It's a sense of safety. It's self-worth. It's the right to breathe slowly. And that's why I'm making this video. Today, I want to pull the curtain back a bit so you can see what normal actually looks like. Not normal on Instagram. Normal in real life. Some numbers will shock you. Some might make you feel lighter. Like, oh, so I'm not the only failure here. And a few numbers will give you a gentle slap in the face, a real wake-up call. Not to shame you, but to stop you from guessing. Because when you know the real baseline, you can finally decide, do you want to live like the majority? Or do you want to do things a little differently, just enough for your future to change? Let me ask you this straight. When you think about a normal person financially, do you imagine someone who's doing okay, has a plan, has savings, has a fallback? Or do you picture someone living hand to mouth, paycheck in, then paycheck out, where one toothache is enough to wreck the entire month? The problem is, most of us don't actually know what normal really is. We guess based on a few people around us, a few photos online, a few stories someone told over drinks, and from those fragments, we draw conclusions. Either everyone must be doing better than me, or everyone must be just like me. Both are dangerous because both are just guesses. I like to think about this the same way I think about going to the gym. If you walk into a gym without knowing the average weights people lift, without knowing what a normal body fat percentage looks like, you'll either train too lightly and congratulate yourself that I'm doing fine, or train too heavy and quit because you feel hopeless. Studying is the same. Without benchmarks, you don't know where you stand in order to adjust how you learn. Money works exactly the same way. Data won't make you rich overnight, but it will wake you up. And once you're awake, you start making decisions based on reality, not on the feeling of being compared to others. Today, I'm going to use numbers like a mirror, not for you to look into it and beat yourself up, but so you know what actually needs fixing. And to make this mirror come into focus, let's start with what everyone assumes is the main story: income. Recent data shows that the median income for a full-time worker is around $52,000 a year. Median means the middle point. Half earn more, half earn less. In other words, if you're hovering around that level, you're not falling behind the way it can feel when you scroll social media. You're right in the middle of the crowd. But here's the part that wakes people up. $52,000 isn't the money you actually take home. On paper, it looks fine, sounds like enough to live decently. Maybe treat yourself to a trip once in a while. Enjoy a bit of comfort. Then you look down at the tax line, add insurance, add a bunch of small deductions that somehow always show up, and every time you read your pay stub, it feels like your money just passed through a toll booth with no barrier. The result is that take-home pay usually ends up around $35K, $40K a year, depending on where you live. And once you divide that number by months, the color of everything changes. You start to understand why so many people don't run out of money because they're wasteful, but simply because the money was never as thick as they thought. The feeling of lack doesn't come from personal weakness. It usually starts with a very common misunderstanding. We plan our lives using gross income, but we live on take-home pay. And just getting this one number right already cuts the wrong decisions later about housing, cars, debt, savings by half. And if income delivers the, oh, so I actually take home less than I thought moment, then retirement delivers the, okay, so how exactly am I supposed to plan my future moment? Median data shows that Americans have about $65,000 in retirement savings. At first glance, that doesn't sound terrible. It's the kind of number that lets you reassure yourself for a few seconds. Then comes the twist, and I'm not exaggerating. About 25% don't even have a retirement account. That means $0. Not a little, but non existent. One out of every four people you pass on the street is living on a vague belief that somehow, when the time comes, things will work out. I call that a plan, powered by hope. And hope doesn't pay bills. If you're young, the age breakdown makes things feel both easier to breathe and more unsettling at the same time. Under 25, the median is under $2,000. And honestly, at that age, having $2,000 already means you're trying. Ages 25-34 sit around $14,000. This is where things start to wobble. Because you've been working for a few years, you've seen life, and yet the number is still small in a way that's almost darkly funny. Then it keeps rising with age. But the key point is this. Rising doesn't mean enough. The peak of the story sits with the 65 plus group, with a median of about $88,000. Now, let's do a very dry calculation, but one that carries weight. Many people use the 4% rule to avoid withdrawing too aggressively. 4% of $88,000 is about $3,500 a year. Divide that by 12, and it's under $300 a month. I want you to pause for just one beat right here, $300 a month. Now let me ask you, no need to answer out loud. Could you live on that? Even if your house is paid off, even if you have no debt, is $300 enough for food, utilities, medication, those moments when your body suddenly demands its rights without warning? And what gives me chills isn't that people are lazy, it's that most people never look straight at this number. Retirement always gets pushed to later. But the strange thing is, later, in personal finance, usually arrives much faster than you expect. And so many people end up clinging to a familiar life raft, Social Security. The logic goes something like, okay, retirement savings are thin, but at least there's government support. I understand that feeling well. It's like opening the fridge, seeing exactly one carton of eggs left, and telling yourself, all right, I'm not starving yet, but we need to look straight at the numbers. The average benefit comes out to about $1,550 a month, or roughly $18,600 a year. It sounds not bad. Until you line it up next to rent, insurance, medication, and the list of expenses that age tends to add to, never subtract from. An average always plays its own tricks. If your income history was lower, or you had stretches of not working part-time, interruptions due to family, health, or life events, then what you actually receive can be significantly less. Not because you did something wrong, but because the system calculates based on what you contributed. Put simply, you can't expect a money printing machine from years when there was no ink. This is where a dangerous misunderstanding creeps in. People build entire retirement plans on Social Security, like building a house on sand and hoping today the wind stays calm. I'm not telling you to be pessimistic. I'm asking you to change how you place the bet. Treat Social Security as a bonus, not a foundation. The foundation is what you control: saving, investing, reducing debt, creating breathing room. A bonus is something that's nice if it comes, but if it doesn't, you're still standing. Because in the end, a sense of safety doesn't come from someone will take care of me. It comes from knowing you've prepared enough that you don't have to rely on luck. And once you've heard the retirement story, including Social Security, a very natural reaction kicks in. Fine, I'll deal with the future later. Right now, I'm just living. Yeah, just living. It sounds harmless, but sometimes it's a warm blanket laid over a cold truth. Spending is what decides whether you have a future or not. The average household spends about $5,577 a month, or nearly $67,000 a year. You hear that and might think, wait, my household doesn't spend that much. Or the opposite. Then how does anyone ever have money left? And that's exactly the point. If you spend around that level, you need a matching take-home income just to break even. No saving, no investing, no emergency fund, just standing still. Let's break it down into the main boulders so it's easier to see. Housing averages about $1,885 a month. Every month you're paying just to have a roof and a place to put your stuff. Food comes in around $691 a month. Eating feels like a small thing. but added up, it's very real money. Transportation is about $913 a month, the cost of getting from A to B. And sometimes it feels like you're paying for the right to sit in traffic. And if you live in a big city, that $1,885 housing number probably makes you smile a little. A polite smile, of course, because laughing too loudly might make the landlord raise the rent. In some cities, that amount doesn't rent you a home. It rents you a minimalist living experience, a small room, one window, and the belief that at least I'm close to downtown. The key point isn't whether you have expenses or not, it's whether you can see the whole picture. These three big categories alone already consume a huge chunk of income. And when you don't know how much they're eating up, you'll always feel short on money as a background sensation you can't quite name. When spending is already this heavy, there's one quiet factor that decides whether borrowing hurts a little less or a lot more each time: your credit score. One rare piece of good news is that the average FICO score in the US sits around 715 a level, considered good. That means, at least on paper, many people are still maintaining a minimum level of discipline, paying on time, not letting everything fall apart. But don't let the number 715 lull you to sleep. A credit score is like a thermometer. It tells you the condition. It doesn't cure the illness. And its impact on daily life is far stronger than most people realize. A good score means lower interest rates, easier approvals, less penalty when you borrow for a house or a car. A bad score means you don't just pay more, you may also be treated as if you're untrustworthy, even if you only slipped a few times because life took an unexpected turn. Some places even look at credit during hiring. It sounds absurd, but it's real. Lacking money can get interpreted as lacking responsibility. So what do you actually do with it? Honestly, the mini how-to is painfully boring. And because it's boring, few people do it consistently. 1. Pay on time. Prioritize this over every flashy piece of advice. 2. Don't max out your cards, because the system watches your utilization ratio and reads it as you being strained. 3. Don't open new cards just for that 10% discount at checkout. You're not saving money, you're buying a hit of dopamine in exchange for a messier credit profile. A credit score isn't a trophy to show off. It's a tool so that when you have to borrow, you're not punished just for not knowing better. And in a life where expenses are already heavy, not getting penalized even more is sometimes its own form of getting richer. A credit score sounds neat because it's a clean number, but right underneath that clean number, there's usually something far messier: credit card debt. And this is the ugly part everyone avoids, because looking at it feels like looking at a photo of yourself at 3 a.m. It won't kill you, but you really don't want to stare for long. On average, each household is carrying around $9,000 in credit card debt. That $9,000 isn't a mortgage. At least a house gives you a roof. It's not a car loan. A car still gets you to work. Credit card debt is often debt for things that were already spent, already used, already forgotten. It's the past, but it charges interest like it's the future. And credit card interest is no joke. It typically sits around 15-25%, sometimes even higher. Take an easy example. 20% on $9,000 is $1,800 a year just to pay for the privilege of being in debt. You don't buy anything new, you don't improve your quality of life, you don't even get one extra good meal, you're just sending money to a company because at some point you told yourself, I'll deal with it at the end of the month. If you've ever felt like you keep working but never get ahead, this is one of the quietest leaks. It drains money without creating anything tangible. I know some people will say, but I'm still investing. I'm still DCAing, still in index funds. It sounds disciplined. But we have to be honest about the math. Over the long term, the market might give you around 7% a year, some years more, some years less. Meanwhile, your credit card is taking 20% a year. Clockwork precise. No market conditions required. You can't keep trying to fill a bathtub while leaving the drain wide open and hope that compounding will win. So if you ask me about priorities, I'll answer very calmly. Kill the credit card debt first. Not because you're bad for having debt, but because this is the fight with the clearest odds of winning. Paying off credit card debt isn't just a financial improvement. It gives you something incredibly valuable back. The feeling of a lighter mind when you wake up, knowing you're no longer being charged interest even while you sleep. And after looking at income, spending, retirement, credit card debt, a natural question comes up. So where am I really? There's one number that answers that question quite cleanly, though sometimes a bit brutally: net worth. The formula is so simple it's almost boring. What you own minus what you owe. You add up your home, car, cash, investment accounts, retirement funds, then subtract your mortgage, credit card debt, student loans, and any other loans. What's left is your total strength, no filter, no caption. The median household net worth is around $122,000. That sounds pretty solid, but like all statistics, it only means something when you place it on the timeline of a life. For those under 35, it's usually much lower. The median is somewhere below $14,000. If you're 25, 28 and your number is still small, I wouldn't rush to judge anything. That phase is about laying foundations, paying down debt, learning how to stay upright. Even just not sliding backward already counts as progress. But if you're past 30 and your net worth is still stuck in a we'll deal with it later mode, this is where it's time to wake up. Not to blame yourself, but to recognize a rule. As you move forward, time stops being on your side the way it once was. The 35-44 group usually jumps up significantly around $91,000. Ages 45-54 sit near $168,000. Ages 55-64 around $212,000. And 65-74 can reach roughly $266,000. That upward slope says something very plainly. Most wealth is built through consistency over many years, not through one big lucky break. Net worth isn't there to make you compare yourself and feel bad. It's a report card that tells you which subject needs work: income, spending, debt, or investing. And if you're brave enough to look at it, you'll spend less time living with that vague feeling of I'm doing terribly or I'm probably fine, because then you have a real number to have an honest conversation with. The next question is very practical. How much am I actually setting aside each month for the future? This is where the data makes me both chuckle and feel a bit sad. The average savings rate is only about 6% after tax. 6%. That means if you take home $3,500 a month, on average, you're saving around $210. It's not worthless, but it's like carrying a small umbrella into a storm and telling yourself, well, at least it's something. The bar is actually very low, and yet many people still can't clear it because present-day life consumes almost everything. And that 6% looks even thinner when you put it next to goals that almost everyone thinks about at least once. A down payment for a house, a new car, a kitchen remodel, home repairs, having kids, tuition. Those goals aren't a few $100s. They're numbers big enough that if you only save when there's something left over, you'll always feel like you're running but never arriving. I'm not saying this to discourage you. I'm saying it so you understand why you're trying hard and still feel short. The equation doesn't balance. Many experts recommend at least 10-15% of income just for retirement, and that's not even counting an emergency fund or other goals. If you want to retire earlier, or if you want real choice over your work, that number usually has to be higher. It sounds a bit harsh, I know, but here's a gentle truth. You can't build a spacious future out of a thin leftover. And the good thing about a savings rate is that it doesn't require you to be a genius. It only asks you to do one very adult thing. Decide in advance how much you keep, and then live on what remains. That's the moment you move from hoping to designing. And then there's a number that sounds very nice if you just skim it. The average retirement age is around 61. It sounds like a comfortable finish line. 61 feels like you've had enough of emails, had enough of meetings, and earned the right to say, I'm out. But this is where time plays a rather ironic game, because most people don't receive full Social Security at 61. Usually, it comes later, which means if you stop working at 61, there's a gap of several years you have to bridge on your own. Living expenses, insurance, healthcare, everything. And that gap isn't the kind you can push through for a bit. It's several years where every month keeps asking for money, steadily, like an alarm clock that never has mercy. Many people fall into a paradox. They retire early because they can't stand the job anymore, but they don't have the resources to retire well. Then there's another truth that's even harder to swallow. Retirement isn't 5 years. It can last 20 years, 25 years, even longer. Think about it. If you start working at 22 and retire at 61, you've worked nearly 4 decades. And in return, you need enough money to fund a phase that lasts almost an entire adult lifetime. But the question that makes me pause the most isn't how long will you live? It's how many of those years will you be healthy enough to enjoy? At 61, you might still move well, still want to travel, still want to experience things. But what about 71? 81? Time has its own sense of humor. It may give you many years to be alive, but it doesn't guarantee many years to truly live. That's why preparing for retirement isn't just about money. It's about buying back the right to enjoy your healthier years, instead of being trapped in the anxiety of will this month be enough? And I know it sounds heavy, but this is the kind of heaviness that wakes you up. Hearing all this, I don't want you to fall into the familiar conclusion, so everyone's life is basically screwed whatever. No, this is actually where things get interesting. Because when the average baseline is this low, beating the average doesn't require talent, and it doesn't require any mystical secret sold in a course with the word secret on the thumbnail. You just need to do a few basic things more consistently than most people. And because most people are inconsistent, basic alone is already enough to create distance. First, save more than 6%. You don't need to jump straight to 30%. Just inch it up, stabilize it, and make it the default. Second, avoid credit card debt or kill it as fast as possible. Credit card interest is like running with a backpack full of rocks. No matter how hard you try, it still feels heavy. Third, invest regularly in simple, low-cost things like index funds. Not to beat the market, but so you're not standing still while time keeps moving. I like a very down-to-earth example. If average spending is around $5,500 a month, you only need to live comfortably at $1,000 less per month, not living miserably. Just plugging a few leaks to free up $12,000 a year for saving and investing. $12,000 isn't magic, but it's the raw material for magic. Compound interest. And compound interest doesn't need you to be smarter than anyone else. It just needs you to be a little more patient. What I want you to take away is this. You don't have to win at life in one big move. You just need to beat the average in a few small areas for enough months. And then one day, when you look back, you'll see that you've changed your entire trajectory without becoming someone else, without getting rich fast, just by living more deliberately than most people. If your chest feels a little heavy right now, I want you to slow your breathing for one beat. Because just by sitting here and listening to these numbers, you're already doing something many people avoid their whole lives. Looking reality straight in the face. Most people aren't lacking intelligence, they're lacking the moment where they stop and measure where they actually are. You're doing that. And that's a real advantage, not empty encouragement. Now, instead of panicking, use the data like a map. You don't need to fix everything at once. You just need to find your biggest leak. Some people have great credit, no card debt, but empty retirement accounts because they keep saying, I'll deal with it later. Some are excellent savers, but their money sits idle in a bank account like a car parked forever with the engine off. Others invest consistently, but spending leaks make every month feel tight. Everyone gets stuck in a different way. And here's the closing thought I want to leave you with. Data is only the starting point, not the finish line. It doesn't come to judge you, it comes to give you choice. You can live a normal life on autopilot and get normal results. Or you can choose a little better, a little more consistently, for long enough that one day you look back and realize you've stepped out of the crowd without any miracle at all.